Good morning and welcome to the November 8th, 2018 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. If any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the agenda, there are speaker request forms to the left of the dais. Please fill out the request with the agenda number of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the secretary. At this time, we would also like to ask that if any member of the audience has a cell phone or other electronic device, that you either turn it off or turn the ringer to silent. If you need to take a call, please step out to the hallway so the meeting is not disrupted. The public hearing on item number 1, the approval of the October 25th Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting minutes, is now open. Rachel made the motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 25th.
Second.
And Karen seconded that motion. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2.
Thank you. Item number 2 is a variance request to allow an 8.5 acre parcel of land in the general agricultural district. Item number 2 is also associated with a rezoning application that is on the consent agenda for today's Planning Commission meeting. The subject property is an 8.5 acre parcel of land that's owned general commercial district. It was annexed into the city in 1978 with the associated campground directly to the north. So the campground was here, and at that time when this property was annexed in, it was annexed in as the caretaker's unit for that property in 1978. Since that time, it's operated as a single-family home. And for the majority of that time, the applicants that have requested the variance have lived on that property. The issue that they face is, in order to sell their home and secure an appraisal, they've had difficulty because a single-family home is not permitted in the general commercial district and is currently legal non-conforming as to use. So the applicant has intended to rezone, but because the future land use for the property shows it as mixed-use commercial, a residential component does not fit into that land use category. With that being said, a single-family home is a permitted use in the general agricultural district, but the minimum lot size requirement for that use is to be at 20 acres in the general ag district with a single-family home. Therefore, the applicant has requested a variance to allow an 8.5 acre parcel in the general agricultural district with a single-family home in lieu of the 20 acres required in association with the rezoning application. The property is located just off of Mount Rushmore Road, which is identified as a principal arterial on the major street plan. As I mentioned, the property itself, let's go back, is 8.5 acres. The property is limited by extremely steep slopes on the entire northeastern portion of the property, so the building envelope for the property for the house and the detached garage is located on the far southwest side of the property, and that really represents the main building envelope for the property. The purpose with rezoning to general agricultural district, it's still in compliance with the future land use plan with the idea that it can serve as a holding zone for commercial development in the future should a developer decide that the land is warranted to be developed and rezoned back for commercial purposes. In the meantime, it can operate as a single-family home as a permitted use in the general agricultural district, provided that it has been rezoned in this variance for the 8.5 acre parcel has been approved. I was able to take some site photos of the property. This is looking directly west down the driveway to the house and the garage, east. This is just a little closer shot. And this is looking back to the west. You'll notice that the slope from Mount Rushmore Road, the house is down slope from there, and you can't necessarily see across. To the north is the Zion Lutheran Church. So it's right on, or excuse me, to the south, right on the border of the property, which is also zoned Gen Ag District. And then looking back to the west across Mount Rushmore Road is a cemetery, and again, it's offset quite a ways east from the road. The final picture, this was taken from the campground directly north of the property, so you can note the extremely steep slopes. This is the house here, you can see kind of hidden within the trees, the water tower back behind it. This is looking to the south. With that, staff would recommend the approval of the variance, citing that it's the minimum adjustment necessary for this case in association with the rezoning application to General Agricultural District. And I believe the applicant is also in the audience too. If you have any questions for staff at this time or for them.
Thank you. We do have a speaker request form from Sherry West Twitterow. Would you like to speak to this item?
Hi. As John indicated, this is our home.
I'm sorry, if you could just say your name and address, that's for our
sure.
record keeping.
Sure. I'm Sherry West Twitterow. My husband George and I reside at 4480 Mount Rushmore Road in Rapid City, which is the property that we're speaking to right now. My husband George has actually owned that property for a little better than 40 years. It has only ever functioned as a single-family residence, first for the people who built the campground that was the Lazy J, is now the Rapid City RV Park, and George. And then I married him in '89, and so we've been collecting stuff there ever since. We are now attempting to move into the West Hills Villas, and it has been short of a nightmare trying to do something. We couldn't get a bridge loan on the property because we couldn't find an appraiser. We couldn't sell the property except for a cash deal at this point. You know, when George moved in the 70s, I'm sorry, but you guys weren't taken quite so seriously at that point in time. And you know, so loans were a possibility, but we've been working to try and make this happen, and we're delighted when the people in planning came up with this as a possible option. And the general ag apparently is something, because at first we were talking about maybe going into office commercial, and then they said, down the way, we're looking at a change in that particular zoning component, and you would be in the same situation you're in right now with a non-conforming use. And so I'm really hoping you will grace us with a positive support of our request to continue this. As you saw, that driveway, that 15-foot limited access is what we have to Highway 16. The little V that you see in the property picture on there is an extremely steep slope off of Highway 16. And so logically, if there were going to be commercial development, it would have to come off of actually the east side, which now is general ag, and they run cattle on it. We have cattle into our pine trees. So anyway, I hope for your support.
Thank you. Galen?
Thank you. I support this. I don't see a problem with it. I guess the one question was on that neighboring parcel on the southwest side. There's a square that remains as a general commercial. I'm assuming that's a different property owner, and is that still
that would be
being
Western
used?
Telecommunications,
Okay.
And they have a tower there. So
So it is still used as a commercial and would
correct.
remain that way. Okay, well, that makes sense. I'll make a motion to approve this variance, citing actually criteria for that it's in harmony with the general purposes of the zoning ordinance and would not be injurious to the neighborhood.
So Galen made the motion to approve this variance to allow. Yeah, Vicki.
My apologies for interrupting you. So the recommendation from staff is to approve in conjunction with the associated rezone. The variance to the lot size is only needed if it's rezoned to general agriculture district. It's currently general commercial. There is no minimum lot size. And if the motion maker so deems it appropriate, we would add the criteria that the use is permitted in the zoning district of general ag, and then approve in conjunction with the associated rezone.
Correct, that is my intent.
Okay, does it work for the second? Okay, motion maker and second agreed to that criteria, Vicki. Thank you for stating it. So the motion then is on the floor. Are there any more discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. I think that's the end of our Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. And look for a motion to adjourn. Rachel made the motion to adjourn, and Mike Kwasny seconded that motion. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. We'll now commence the Planning Commission meeting for November 8th, 2018. Same requests here. If you want to speak to an item on the Planning Commission agenda, please fill out a speaker request form and hand it to the staff located along the left wall. On the consent calendar today, items 1 through 3 have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration at this time. The findings of this planning commission are recommendations to the City Council. The City Council will make the final decision with the exception of the following item. Item 2, 18 PD 031. The Rapid City Planning Commission's actions on this item is final unless any party appeals that decision to the Rapid City Council. All appeals must be submitted in writing to the Department of Community Development by close of business on the 7th full calendar day, following action by the Planning Commission. Are there any items 1 through 3 that staff would like to remove? Any items 1 through 3 that any Planning Commissioner would like removed? And are there any items 1 through 3 that any audience member would like removed for separate consideration? The chair would then entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar items 1 through 3 in accordance with staff's recommendations. Mike made the motion to approve the consent calendar items 1 through 3. Is there a second? And Kurt seconded that motion. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4.
Mr. Chair, if we could consider items 4, 5, and 6 together.
Sounds good.
These are 2 rezone requests to change existing zoning to office commercial and an initial plan development to allow a 4-story apartment complex on property located in the northwest corner of Fox Road and the service road of Mount Rushmore Road. There has been a lot of interest from the neighborhood regarding this item. We had a great meeting with the applicants yesterday and their consultant, and there are some design options that they would like to look at in order to address some of those concerns that have been brought forward. And it's my understanding that they are also going to be putting together a meeting with the neighborhood to have a one-on-one discussion with regarding those concerns. And they have requested that these 3 items be continued to the December 6th Planning Commission meeting, and that would be our recommendation.
All right, is there a motion then to continue items 4 through 6 to the December 6th Planning Commission? All right, Mike Kwasny made the motion. Second. And I'll give that one to Karen. Karen seconded that motion. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7.
Thank you. Item number 7 is a final plan development overlay to allow an apartment building in the office commercial district at the property described as 1330 East Minnesota Street. Current zoning for the property is office commercial, and it was approved for an initial plan development and rezoning back in July, and now this is the final plan development overlay for that apartment building. The apartment building will be 24 units and 3 stories tall. This is an aerial shot of the property, and this is phase 3 of the development. Phase 1 and 2 are these 2 apartment buildings directly to the west. Both of those apartment buildings are 2 stories, so this final phase will add 1 story to the development. Future land use for the property shows it as mixed-use commercial, which identifies office commercial as a listed zoning district. And the property is located along East Minnesota Street and Campbell Street. East Minnesota is a minor arterial on the city's major street plan, and Campbell Street is a principal arterial street. The applicant has requested an exception to allow a height of 38.5 feet in lieu of 35 feet for the office commercial district. Part of the reasoning behind this is to allow for vaulted ceilings on the 3rd floor, in addition to adding architectural character to the roof line of the neighborhood. Maximum allowed height in office commercial district is 35 feet, so this would be about 3.5 feet higher than the maximum allowed height. Again, it will be 24 units, and the primary building will be set back significantly from both East Minnesota Street and Campbell Street. This is an overshot of the garage heights. There will be 6 main stall garages on the east side of the property, at the east side of that parking lot. And staff would support the exception request to allow 38.5 feet in lieu of 35 feet for the property as well. And this is an overview of the site plan showing landscaping and again noting the setback for the primary structure off of Minnesota Street and Campbell Street. I was able to visit the site and take some site photos. This is looking directly to the north at the southeast corner of the property. This is just an overview of the property itself, again looking north. This is looking back to the east, facing Campbell Street. And those are the apartments from the Phase 1 and 2 development for the property directly to the west, and noting that they're 2 stories and this structure would be 3 stories. And this is looking back to the northeast, a little closer to Campbell Street. Directly to the southwest is a residential district, and then there is also a bank directly south of the property as well. Staff would recommend approval of the final plan development overlay to allow the apartment building with stipulations.
Thank you for the presentation. Karen?
Thank you. I just have one question. Are the apartments that are just to the west, are they this 38 feet also? Did we have an exception for those apartments?
They are 2 stories. So
Oh,
this
those
would
2
be the
stories.
only one that would be 3 stories.
Okay, sorry, I missed that. Thank you.
Other questions or comments on this item? Okay, Karen made the motion to approve this item with the stipulations as shown. Is there a second? Rachel seconded that motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8.
Item number 8 is 18 PD-033, a final plan development to allow an oversized garage. Property located at 1780 Skyline Ranch Road. Take you through some slides. Notice it's located west of Mount Rushmore Road. Property is on Park Forest District, which requires minimum 3-acre lots, so the lot sizes out in this area are larger. This one is 6 acres. Here we have aerial of the property. It's to note that on this property to the east was approved an oversized garage, total garage space of over 4,000 square feet, and to the west is a property which was developed when it was in the county, and it has a horse barn measuring approximately, and buildings measuring approximately 15,000 square feet in size. That was approved. Note that it was approved in the county and then annexed into the city. The property to the east was developed through when it was in the city. Future land use is forest conservation. What that lets you know is that there is the larger lots and it is forested. The applicant is currently coordinating with the Rapid City Fire Department on a wildland fuels mitigation plan, and they will continue to thin out and complete that plan of action. Here we have showing the major street plan. Tower Road is a collector street. That's what Skyline Ranch Road comes off of. Site plan doesn't show up great, but if you remember where this is Skyline Ranch Road, and then J.W. Gould Memorial is the private access that leads to the north, the existing single-family dwelling, and then directly to the west of that is a proposed 3,068 square foot detached accessory building. It will include a carport on the north side garage, and then on the south side, a greenhouse. There is an existing 900 square foot attached garage on the existing dwelling, so they're asking for a total of 3,968 square feet in lieu of the maximum allowed 1,500 square feet. The reason this isn't a planned development is that there is an exception request, which is to waive the requirement to pave the first 50 feet of the driveway leading up to the proposed garage. Staff is recommending approval of that exception request because J.W. Gould Memorial Drive is a private access and it is currently graveled. So they are proposing to do asphalt millings in lieu of paving, and Public Works has indicated concurrence with that request, so we're recommending approval. Oh, do have it. Here we have elevations of the proposed detached garage. Here you can see open carport on that. It'll be on the north side, garage space for storage and parking, and then on this south side a greenhouse, and that's the elevation what would be viewed from that south side of that greenhouse. One of the issues staff had with this proposal was that the proposed detached accessory structure, the design of it wasn't in keeping with the residential character of the property, the existing dwelling on the property. And if we get to the pictures that we took, they are proposing to match the color of the roof and the siding. However, in this area, you can see there's some red stone accents on the dwelling and then darker colors on the garage doors. So you'll notice in one of the stipulations of approval that prior to issuance of a building permit, that the applicant submit plans showing that they'll match some of those features. We'd like to revise that stipulation of approval. It says that on all sides of the building they'll have to match, but because the north side is facing into those trees, we're recommending that it be revised to say on all sides except the north that they match. Provide some of that red stone, darker garage doors, or at least matching garage doors, and then some darker trim to match the existing dwelling, and that'll keep it in character with the residential property, the dwelling, and then in character with the neighborhood. We're looking at, again, these are larger lots. This is looking to the west, back to the east, along the road leading back to Tower Road. A lot of trees in the area, large lots. This is looking directly to the south, and then to the west along Skyline Ranch Road. This is J.W. Gould Memorial Drive, which they're proposing access from. You can see that it's graveled, and then there's it drops. Once you get down it a bit, it drops away. And then this is looking at the location of where the proposed detached structure would go on that west side of the property, and the trees that are existing along that north side. And then this photo is showing from J.W. Gould Memorial Drive that the horse barn on that adjacent property to the west, it is very large, but it is also hidden away. And so, though it may not be in keeping with the residential character in the neighborhood, which we're intending with this property and the one that was adjacent to the east, this one you can see developed in the county. It's hidden away behind trees and drop in elevation. With that, staff's recommending approval of the final plan development overlay. Are there any questions for staff at this time? Oh, sorry, the recommendation is to approve with the revised stipulation saying all sides but the north.
Thanks, Fletcher. I don't have any questions up right away. I do have a couple speaker requests, though. I'll start with Bob Brandt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob Brandt, Mountaintop Construction. I live in Rapid City. I'll be the general contractor on the project. We agree with all the stipulations of the planning department except for one. The rock does not seem like it's real necessary. If you could, can you pull up the front view of the house again? There are some landscaping berms that are built in just to the north of Skyline Ranch Road that really will block the front view. And we are also sinking the greenhouse into the dirt 3 feet. There was another one. Oh yeah, that works. So you can see the berms that are in the front of the house there. So from the road, you're hardly going to see anything except the top of the roof and a little bit of the windows on the greenhouse. If we do put rock on either corner or in the middle of the greenhouse, it just takes away some of the glass, takes away the effectiveness of the greenhouse. No one will see the east side at all. There's a lot of trees between them and the neighbor to the east. So no one will see any rock on the east side, and then also, like you said, the trees block it from the west side. So other than that, we will match the garage doors, we will match the color of the trim. We specifically picked a metal building to keep Tim Billings happy. It's a lot less fire danger up there than if we would have matched the wood siding and asphalt shingles on the house. So we respectively ask that you approve this without making us do the rock. We just don't think the rock adds anything to it, and it also detracts from the effectiveness of the greenhouse. Thank you.
Second request to speak is from Cliff Beanert.
Good morning, Commission. I'm Cliff Beanert, and I reside at 2150 Skyline Ranch Road. So I drive by this premises that we're talking about on a daily basis multiple times. The key objection to this approval is that this is not in keeping with the residential character of this neighborhood. This is a large metal building, a large pole barn, I'm assuming. Because of the size and because of the location, it's very obtrusive. There were a couple other buildings that Fletcher noted, the Gould Farm buildings and also the building behind Jay White's residence. Those are buildings, the Gould Farm has been there for years, decades. Jay White was approved here about 3 years ago or 2 years ago, but that building is very far set back and below the normal viewpoint. It's hard to see. You have to really look for it to see it. Whereas this structure is very prominent, and it'll be a very prominent structure that I don't know what it's going to look like. And I really question the architectural features, and again, the objection is not conforming with the residential quality of that neighborhood. I really am surprised that it's gotten to this point because of the covenants that exist on that property. There are covenants that do not allow garages or outbuildings or anything of this nature. So you probably haven't heard the end of this. I don't know what any other ramifications are, but I'm surprised that it even got this far.
Just as a note, we aren't allowed to take into account covenants or homeowners agreements.
Okay.
We just deal with the city code, and
Very
in
good.
this kind, it's the garage size.
Eric, I didn't understand that, so I apologize if I stepped in the wrong spot there. But I just wanted to voice my opposition. I also represent my wife. I know some of the neighbors in the area. In fact, I'm surprised that we don't see a few more people present here voicing their opposition. Any questions?
Thank you. I don't have any up right now, but we perhaps will call you back if there is something.
Very good. Thank you.
Vicki?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when staff looked at this 3,000 square foot plus garage structure, and granted it has a carport component and a greenhouse component, but the metal siding and the metal roof were a concern for us too. Is that the standard that we want to establish inside the city limits as appropriate? And in this case, because of the design of the home and looking at some of those features that could be implemented onto this metal facility, they are matching the color of the metal siding to match the siding of the home. So from a distance from the road, one may not be able to ascertain specifically that there is a difference in material of the siding. But I think the suggested accents that Fletcher described are imperative so that we aren't establishing that these metal kits that can be purchased and placed that do have more of a pole barn or Quonset appearance is something that's been accepted in Rapid City. Our compromise was, this is an area that is fairly heavily wooded. We have seen a similar garage approved to the east. That siding does match the siding of the residence, and it does sit lower in elevation than this one will. So the compromise that we brought forward was to allow the property owner to secure the uses and storage needs on his site, but yet try to bring forward some more of those residential characteristics that you would typically see on a residential lot. And Park Forest is a residential district in lieu of more of a ranch area. And so we would recommend that the stipulation to require the additional accents on all sides but the north be held in place if you do choose to approve this.
Thank you, Vicki. Mike?
As I understand it, there's a greenhouse that he referred to, and maybe I could have the engineer come up and discuss that just for a minute.
I think he's shooting for you, Bob. Would you be willing
I'm
to
sorry.
describe the greenhouse?
Called me a nasty name, an engineer.
Oh, sorry.
If you notice the top view, which is the south view, the greenhouse will be, the frames of the greenhouse will be the dark bronze colored like you see in most stores on a commercial glass installation. The windows will all be, you can see there's nothing but frame and windows all the way across the front. They are about 9 feet 9 high. The grade is only about a foot below the windows. That's why I said we're sinking this into the ground almost 2.5 to 3 feet. So there'll just be a little bit of foundation exposed that will be painted dark, painted brown, and then all you see is greenhouse and the roof. So I guess I would ask the city, where do they want us to put the rock on this elevation? Do you want us to take out 4 feet of windows on each end and put rock there, or do you want some in the middle? And then if you look on the west view, if you take the 4 feet of rock around on the west, no one sees it except a few people driving on J.W. Gould Road, and there's trees in the way. And again, you take away a lot of the effectiveness of the greenhouse if we get rid of 8 or 10 or 12 feet of glass.
Okay, well, I understand the greenhouse and what you're trying to accomplish with that, and so I can see the problem there. But I believe what we're trying to accomplish is to blend in as much as possible, and by having the rock the rest of the way, I think that will accomplish what we're after. I could understand the problem with the greenhouse and where the rock might affect that. I guess that's my only problem, and I think that maybe something should be considered as a maybe take away on that side, the rock, but continue with the rest of it, if that's a possibility.
Can you pull that print back up? I guess I would ask you, what do you think we should do on the west side, on the east and west side? Come in from the greenhouse and put 4 feet up on that side, or what would be an acceptable compromise with you?
Vicki, what is it that is being proposed for that? Do you have something that's proposed?
Could we show the elevation of the single-family residence or the picture, Fletcher, that you took? There you go. So there's rock features there that if you use similar stone, and whether they want to put a panel similar to how the home has it, that would work. If they wanted to do something that would be 4 to 6 foot high from the ground elevation up, we wanted to leave them the flexibility of choosing instead of mandating it, but just introducing that feature. And if it is the desire of the Planning Commission to maintain the feature along the east and west sides of the structure, then the stipulation could be revised to read that way, that the south and north did not have to be revised, but just the east and west. And so the flexibility of how they bring that forward needs to be similar in what we see on the residence.
And I think that's a good compromise. I would propose that we go with the east and west, okay, and continue to have that, keeping the greenhouse, not needing that. And I think you've got some flexibility with that said that can make that blend in nicely into the neighborhood. And that's basically what I believe we're after, and I think that's a good option for the owner of the home. So that's what I would propose. And I would put that up as a
You want to make a motion?
motion.
All right. So Mike's making the motion, and correct me when I get this wrong, that to approve the oversized garage with the stipulations as noted, other than revising stipulation number 5 to include the red rock accents on the east and west
East
side.
and west side. Correct.
Okay, that's the motion. Is there a second? Galen seconded the motion. Further discussion, Karen?
Thank you. I have a question as far as the area. I know it's a large lot, but for the neighbors, I have had a concern about the building material also, because it's, just seems like it doesn't sound like it's going with the rest of the neighborhood. But if they can make it so that it blends in, that's appropriate. So I support the motion as it is so far. My question really is, I know there's a large flat area in front, and I'm not saying to put stuff in front of the greenhouse, but if there's a way to put some trees or something, so when people go by, they don't necessarily see the glass first. And I know there's a berm there, but on the other side of the berm, closer to the road, if there's a way, Bob, that you can incorporate some landscaping that might help it.
Karen, if you will look at the picture, there are quite a few trees between the road and the greenhouse existing.
Okay. Can you,
Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's a dozen trees between the road and where the greenhouse will be.
yeah, I'm looking, oh, there, yeah, that one picture right there. There's some extra parcels of land that maybe you can add a few more, just to block some of that greenhouse effect. And I understand what you're saying, Bob, but I'm just trying to think of things that might help the neighborhood.
I don't think you're really going to see more than about the top 3 or 4 feet of the greenhouse from the road. You can see that berm, it's pretty about 4-foot high berm there, and then we're sinking into the ground 3 feet. So you're not going to see much of the greenhouse from the road. You
Okay.
can see the road is lower, their driveway, it's not a steep drive up by any means, but the house is above the road where it goes across the front of Skyline Ranch Road.
Yeah, I see that. I'm trying to visualize how high that greenhouse will be, so the effect, that's all I'm looking for, is to see what that would look like.
It's 9 feet 9 from the top from the ground to the roof on the south side.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks. That was just a comment that I had, that maybe there is something that we could do to ease the concern of anybody driving by, so, thank you.
Justin?
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to kind of follow up with Karen's points a little bit. Can you pull up the aerial again, please? I'm trying to compare that to what the sketch was. Can you draw where the garage sits based on that? Is it sitting in front of the trees? Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be in front of the trees.
So you're not taking out any trees or anything that's sitting in front of it?
Well, as noted in the presentation, they are working with the Rapid City Fire Department on a wildland fuels mitigation plan, so they will be taking out, if they haven't taken out more trees, they might be taking out more as well, but probably on that north side of the property.
And then just to ask a question on what you mentioned a little bit ago about the materials, the existing house is wood siding?
Yes.
Okay.
Vertical wood siding, or,
Okay.
excuse me, horizontal lap siding.
Okay. So, and I guess my question is for Tim, maybe that you would prefer to not have that from a fire safety standpoint, because I can see how if we match that, it would make a lot more sense, but I also don't want to alleviate the concern of fire safety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely, in this particular situation, when you're dealing with the wildland-urban interface area, we prefer the non-combustible, limited or non-combustible materials. So the material that's proposed is certainly desirable for us, and we would encourage the use of that. So.
What about like a fiber cement hardy board or something?
Hardy board would also meet that criteria, the fiber cement material. So.
Okay. So just, I guess I'm not, in general, I don't have a huge problem. I think you should be able to build a garage on your property. It seems like it's meeting a lot of stipulations, but I think with Karen's point, if we can try to match as best we can, I think we need to keep some of the stone accents and match the existing house as best as possible. It's not going to be perfect, I get, but maybe entertaining some, I don't know if we do that here, but maybe entertaining some of those options of there are other options for siding as opposed to metal, standing seam metal siding. The metal roof, I guess I totally get the asphalt shingles. You don't want to do that, so I guess I'm okay with that. But I would think if we did something like that, I don't know what everybody else thinks, but maybe that gets a good compromise that it can go in, but keep it non-combustible. But even though it's not matching the siding exactly, it's giving it more of a residential look as opposed to like a pole barn look. So I guess that's a recommendation or a thought I have, and I don't know how we can, or if that's a building permit issue as it goes through the city or what, but.
Well, I think, sorry to interrupt.
No,
I think we'd have to stipulate that here if we're requiring a certain material as part of this plan development. There is a motion on the floor, though. If I interrupted,
Nope.
Justin, Rachel, do you have comments on that?
Yeah, I'm actually just trying to make sure that I orient this right in my mind. Could you pull up the elevation again, Fletcher, please? As I understand it, the south side is going to be facing the same direction as the front of the house is facing, and then the east side is going to be facing Gould Drive?
The west side will face Gould Drive.
Okay, so is that the front of the garage right there where we're looking at the garage doors? That's facing Gould Drive?
That is the west view. That's the west elevation.
So it's facing...
It's literally identical to the east elevation, but flip-flopped.
Okay. Just kind of piggybacking based off of what Karen had said previously, I see those very large doors, I'm assuming for RVs or something like that, and then there's that big kind of flat space. And I don't like to micromanage things, but at the same time, this is a planned development. This is, forest district. It's supposed to be, kind of nicer. It's not agricultural or anything like that. And I'm concerned about that very large open space where there's, it's just going to be metal siding. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I can definitely see Cliff's concerns about that, kind of facing the neighbors. And I think we do need to amend that. And so the fiberglass, is that what you were talking about? Some sort of, Justin? Hardy board or something like that. If it could be made to look more like the house so that, maybe the neighbors aren't going to be so turned off by the look of it, since, this is kind of a more expensive neighborhood. The zoning, I think, is more supportive of something that would be nice rather than a pole barn. I don't know how we would amend the motion on the floor to include that.
Well, we'd either have to have the motion maker and second amend their motion, or we just vote on it and see what happens. I guess there
Mr.
is a
Chair,
substitute motion.
It would be a substitute motion.
Okay.
So I would make a substitute motion, if it's acceptable, to approve with staff stipulations with the alteration in point 5 that the stone be required on the east and west side, and that the fiber board be included as well as non-combustible material that can make it more residential in whatever way that you guys, look at to actually make it look nice and fit in with the house.
So you use a non-combustible horizontal siding that matches the house siding in look.
That sounds good.
Okay. Vicki?
Mr. Chair, as I see the applicant probably being very frustrated right now. If we could put the elevation up of the garage again. I so appreciate the conversation today, and it's absolutely what staff was struggling with too. And noting that from a distance, whether this be metal or other non-combustible material, it would be hard to ascertain if we could capture some of the features of the home. And so our request is that the doors all be of the darker brown to match the doors and color schematic of the house, and that those rock or stone features, and perhaps what would be a more desirable option, is that we do put a vertical panel from the roof to the ground floor, half the width of that large panel that would be from the residential door over to the greenhouse, right in that area. If it could be required that half of that have a stone feature to it, and then we get the darker doors with then, of course, we've got the glass accents at the other end. And then if we could show the picture of the home. There we go. And so you can see they've got that same vertical stone. They've got the darker wood features on the home. And I would assume by now the material for this has already been purchased. And so trying to be reasonable and capture some of the more upscale components, I don't know if changing the siding is going to get us the same impression or improvement that some of these other features would. And so if the motion maker concurs that being more specific as to the location and design schematic of the stone and the color of the doors would provide that residential look versus changing the material, that might be an option, or certainly you could go with sticking with the stipulation as you've noted.
Okay, I'll withdraw my substitute motion.
Okay. So we're back to the original motion by Mike and Galen. Karen, you have comments on this one?
Thank you. And I'm not sure, and Bob, you, as a construction guy, you can tell me if this is possible, but something from the front of the, where the front of the glass parts show to the public, on the top of that, because you're going to have a framework of some kind, is it possible to put some other materials on top of the metal, or change the metal out for hardy board on that, just that one side, so that it looks more like a vertical siding to match the house? If that's possible, that's one question. And then the other thought is, I agree, I think there should be some more stone, some, not just on the bottom, but I think that vertical stone, I think that would help accent it, whether you put it right in the middle of that open space or closer to the glass siding, something like that I think would be a benefit. Do you have any comments on that?
Bob?
Yeah, if you'll look at the top elevation where the top of the glass on the right side, there's only, down boy, there's only about an 8-inch fascia board on the front of the overhang. So that will be the dark brown color, just like your gutter flashing or your gutters on the house. And there'll be a gutter on there anyways, it'll be a dark brown gutter.
So that space we're seeing above is the roof?
Yes, it's only about 8 inches. It's a 2x6 outriggers on the roof structure, and then a fascia board, so it's only about 8 inches tall from the top of the glass to where the roof starts, the tin is. And that'll be a dark brown gutter.
Okay, and then, but you would be able to put the rock or whatever on the west side?
Well, I'd like to, if we could pull up the aerial view, please. If you look at it, if we put, I mean, I understand to try to get the rock on the east and west side, but the only people that are, there's no one except the coyotes and the mountain lions that are going to see it from the east side. You can see there's only one neighbor to the east, and there's a lot of trees there. J.W. Gould is a private access road. There's 4 houses that are on that road, and then the big white barn there. And you can see all the trees between J.W. Gould Road and the edge of the the pole barn. It's 125 feet from the property line to the west edge, and there's probably 30 trees in there that will block the view of that. So just from that standpoint, no one's going to see this rock. And if we're talking, if Vicky's talking 12, or, 8 or 10 feet wide, 12 feet high, we're talking another $20,000, $30,000 to put that rock on there that literally no one will ever see. So that's the reason I question it.
Okay, thanks, Bob. It's just, you can see we're struggling trying to make that pole barn fit into a neighborhood. So anything you can do to help in that regard is, I think, is what we're looking for.
And if this were sitting up and visible and no trees around it, I would agree. Something would have to be done. It would look ugly. But this thing is literally hidden on 3 sides with the trees. And in the front side, that berm, you're only going to see the top 3 or 4 feet of the glass. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Justin?
Thanks. So I tend to agree with the east elevation and the north elevation really facing trees. So I'm not really held up on that, and I don't know if material's been ordered or not, but if that's standing seam and it's facing trees, I guess so be it. I think the south elevation and the west elevation are critical. The south being mostly glass because the greenhouse, I think what Mike said earlier, I agree, there's not much we can do. You're basically gonna see glass in the roof. Any foundation you do see, I would hope that it's at least colored or painted or something. But I think for me, I'm hung up on the west elevation and what we can do because, sure, it's a few homes, but I think to Cliff's point, if you're used to driving in and out and coming in and out, and all of a sudden there's a metal pole barn, it really takes away from the features. So I think if we can make, and I don't want to say what the solution is, and maybe it's a smaller strip of stone. I still think if we went to a hardy board or something that matched the color, it would at least give it a residential look as opposed to metal. And still meet what Tim's looking for from a fire safety standpoint. So I don't know what the combination needs to look like, or I don't want to say what it should look like, but I do think if we went with a siding of some sort, non-combustible, with some stone, and whether even if it's just a 3-foot up band or maybe one smaller 2-foot swath or a couple, I don't know, but I think that to me allows you to build it but still kind of, as best we can, align with what's going on in the community and the homes and the neighbors. So that would be my thought. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I don't know what the next step would be, so.
Kurt?
Yeah, there was a planned development overlay put on this area to do just this, bring these things to planning so that the neighbors can be protected and, have a say on what goes on. I'm not in favor of building this huge pole barn, ugly thing out there, and neither are the neighbors, obviously. So, as part of this, you're also getting an exception. You're getting exceptions for the size of the building. You're getting an exception to do pave the driveway 50 feet. And now you're trying to get exceptions, or not exceptions, but you're fighting over making it look good. I just don't agree with that. The plan development overlay is to protect the neighborhood, and if the neighbors, are opposed to having a pole barn, they ought to be able to come and argue the point. And I know we're not supposed to talk about covenants, but I would suggest that, if this does go through, that, you guys with the covenants, have to do that through civil action, and, that's your second level of argument, and input into what's going on out there. So anyway, I'm in favor of the motion if we get the exterior look to look more like the neighborhood. So that's my comments, but I think the plan development works in this situation. Thank you.
So the motion we have on the floor still is the original one by Mike, where we would require the stone accents to be included on the east and west side. Any further discussion on this motion, Mike?
So we didn't, in that, we do not address the adding the extra, and I guess I would like to add that in. I think that's a good option to fit this into the neighborhood. I think it's a good option to put, whether it's the 2 foot, and as I understand, Vicki has said that she doesn't want to dictate what goes on, but I think that there are covenants, and yes, we aren't supposed to discuss covenants, but I would hope that the group of people that are in that would be able to figure out what looks good and be able to work together as a group and make that look and fit into the neighborhood. That would be the purpose, in my opinion, of covenants, but hopefully that could happen. I think it should be stipulated in that, and I would add that to that as a motion maker, that they, and I don't know how to state it, but to add additional siding or rock work or whatever to make that fit into the neighborhood and really make it stand out as something that's pleasant to the eye.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Vicki.
Has
Taking
the
suggestions.
Planning Commission, as a group, we've, currently the motion on the floor is that the east and west elevation have a stone feature to match the stone features on the existing residence. Are you still, the majority of you, in agreement that it should be the east and west, or are we just down to the west elevation now? If we can resolve that one, then maybe I can provide you a proposed stipulation.
Mr. Chairman, can I make an offer?
Yeah, Bob.
What would you guys think about 4 foot of glass from the foundation wall to the roof on the west side, right next to the glass?
4 foot
Right in the
of
corner,
stone, you mean?
4 feet wide from the foundation wall up to the roof, which is about 10, 11 feet at its high side. 4 feet wide from the edge of the glass up to the roof.
Have Bob draw it in.
Yeah, if you want.
Yeah, just straight down there, 4 feet wide, from the edge of the glass all the way to the roof, from the top of the foundation wall to the bottom of the roof. And then let me keep the vertical siding the rest of the way. The vertical siding, trying to get that horizontal hardy plank to tie in with the roof doesn't work real well on a metal roof. And from 125 feet from where the road is to there, I'm not sure if the color is the same, you're not really going to be able to see through the trees whether it's horizontal siding or vertical siding. So that would be an acceptable compromise to Paul Jensen, the owner, I believe, if we just did the rock on the west side.
Mike, you're the motion maker, so we'll put you on the spot first.
Well, what is the purpose of the glass, though? I guess you're putting glass, a window of sorts?
No, you said glass, Bob, but I think you're talking about 4 foot wide of stone,
4
right?
foot wide of stone from the glass,
okay.
from the glass wall up to the roof.
Okay. I guess that would add some feature to it. If you just had a fiberboard as the cement board that on this side, is that an option to allow you that option to put more, basically so the neighbors have a good view of this? And that's what we're really after, is I think the neighbors have the right to be able to be happy with the neighborhood. And it is a pole barn, basically, but to make it as good as it can be, to make the neighbors feel comfortable with their neighborhood, I think it's a good option, and I think, I guess, is it possible, Bob, to put on just the one side?
It is possible. It's very hard to interface the horizontal siding when you get to the roof to make it weather tight up there.
Okay.
I'm not sure where this gentleman lives, but I don't know if has any of the 4 people that live down J.W. Gould Road talked to the Planning Commission about this, Vicki, or does any of those 4 people have any questions about this?
So they wouldn't be allowed to speak to Planning Commission. I don't have any knowledge that they've called into staff.
I think you're proposing a good option here, and I think that's a better option than nothing. I would like you, and maybe we stipulate this in the proposal, and then I would suggest that you get with the neighbors and find out what they'd really kind of like to have, and make it with something where this is a neighborhood that gets involved and says, you know, that'll work for me. Because I think they're willing to, and maybe Cliff, if you want to come up and have a minute.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. This has been really a very one-sided conversation. And I just want to, let's put some more context or paint this picture a little better. The aerial view that was shown, it looks quite a bit different today than it did when that picture was taken. There's been 12 to 15 trees removed from that lot, from the front of the lot, not from where the building goes. And so it's been denuded. It looks very different. And what we're going to have here and what we're talking about, and I really appreciate your problem-solving efforts and your desire to help it conform to the residential character. I really appreciate that. Thank you. But any way we look at this, we're putting lipstick on a pig. This is a Hampshire, whether you want to see it as one or not. This is an albatross setting in a very nice neighborhood of Rapid City, South Dakota, within the city confines. And so it's just, it doesn't fit for me. Maybe there's a better location. He's got 6 acres. Maybe there's a better location that would fit and he could work with the neighbors. I have to look at it when I drive in and out. I don't have to look at it every day like the adjacent neighbors. I'm surprised they're not here. But they're probably counting on the covenant being the issue here. I don't know. But, this is just an albatross.
Okay. Well, we've gotten pretty far afield here.
Yeah, okay, well, I think that
the
the motion, I would put that additional rock work in there, or on the side there between the glass.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Vicki.
so is it the motion maker's desire that this be specific to only the west elevation?
That would be that vertical, but I think the east should also have the rock work.
Okay, so
So I think it should be maintained, unless, I guess I would ask Vicki, you said that there's an option that you see?
I'm just trying to help you formulate something that would create a motion, and what I'm hearing you say is that the exception to allow the proposed 3,968 square feet of garage area on the property be approved contingent upon a 4-foot wide stone vertical panel being proposed on the east and west elevations as identified by the applicant's consultant, and we are still recommending that the doors be of darker color to match the brown features of the home.
Correct.
So if that is the desire of the motion maker, then do a friendly amendment to your motion to include that language.
So I would like to make that friendly amendment.
Okay. Galen, does that strike you as okay as the seconder on this motion, or do I need to look for another one?
I'll do it, but if I can maybe
Yeah, yeah.
before here. So I don't like the idea of trying to design this guy's garage here at 7 a.m. on a Thursday morning when all we're going by is looking at 2 pictures basically. So I think what I would propose is that we continue this for a meeting, come back, really kind of sketch out a little bit, and what I really want to see from the applicant is,
Can't start then this year.
I don't know if this, can we continue, is that even possible? But what I'd like to see is a picture, and then you actually draw the garage on there. You don't have to do a professional architectural rendering of it or anything, but just sketch it on there so we can see how high the roof line is, where the rock feature is going to be, because it's just hard to visualize it, and we're trying to dictate where to put these things, and it's not, I don't think it's productive here right now. So what I propose is we continue this. You've heard from us what we want. You kind of go sketched out a little bit, figure out what's going to work for both sides. Let's try to take another crack at it next meeting if that's possible.
Vicki?
Bob Brandt just noted to me that that would prevent them from doing construction this year. So I guess I ask Mr. Brandt, I know that the Planning Commission is being very specific about the design. Are you and your client okay with that design that they came up with in the meeting? And if so, indicate approval of the motion on the floor, or the other option would be to continue the meeting and have you bring forward elevations that would show what you and your client would want to propose.
Yeah, I mean, we're more than happy to put the rock on the west side. There's going to be half a dozen people that see it as they drive out of those 4 houses every day. This gentleman, if he lives farther down Skyline Ranch Road, will not see any of that rock through the trees. The 2 neighbors directly to the east and Mr. Gould have given Paul Jensen complete okay approval on the design of this. If we have to put the rock on the east side, again, nobody will ever see it. We'll do that if that's what it takes to get this garage built this year. I think it's a waste of time and money because literally no one will see it. The neighbor can't see it to the east, and no one will see it driving down the road. But if that's what it takes to get it to the Planning Commission, we'll certainly do 2 bands 4 feet wide of rock, 1 on each side.
Okay, so you'd rather have it heard today? That's what I'm
Yes.
getting. Okay.
If we go another month, then we're precluded from doing anything until May.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I may, excuse me, fighting a cold here. I hope that we're not missing the point of what we're trying to accomplish here. What we're trying to accomplish is to add a new large accessory structure to a residential property that we hope will not appear to be agriculture or industrial. And so by just adding a strip of rock on one side of the building, I'm not sure we're accomplishing that. I'm not sure either if it's so important how many people are going to be able to see from which direction what the house or the new structure will look like. I think what we're trying to accomplish is a building that fits in its character as a building in a residential property, not just add a strip of rock on one side so that 6 people might be more pleased as they pass by the house or the structure.
Thank you. So we have the amended motion on the floor with a 4-foot vertical strip of rock on the east and the west side. That's where we're at. Justin, you're up again.
Thanks. So I'm kind of, Kurt made a very good point earlier, and it's like we got exception upon exception upon exception upon exception that we keep going to. And so, you know, I'm having a hard time to just keep conceding everything. And I think there's a lot of concern, and I think there's a good point of the structure itself, but I think we're trying to find a compromise on basically one side of the building. And I think Galen had a good point too, in that we are trying to design this thing, but we need you guys to tell us what you can do to accommodate. You've got a pretty good picture of what we're looking for. I think delaying this doesn't delay till May. You can still build it. It just costs more. You can do concrete in the winter all day long. It just costs more. That's the reality of it. So, you know, is that ideal for you or the applicant or the owner? No, but we're also trying to accommodate a lot of things that maybe don't fit to allow this to happen. So there has to be a compromise back too, and so far we really haven't got one, I don't feel like. So I tend to agree that east and the north from an elevation standpoint, but that west side and the south side I think really have to fit as best it can. And I would actually agree with Galen that maybe we need to wait and see what you guys can come up with to make it look right. Yes, that delays you getting started this fall, but at the end of the day, that's part of coming on November 8th to the Planning Commission to try to get something through with about 6 different exceptions. You know, had this happened in July, we'd have a different perception of it. But we're late in the game right now anyway when it comes to winter. So I don't know how we can redo it, but I would agree with Galen on that about delaying this.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Vicki?
Then, Justin, is it your intent then to propose a substitute motion to continue this item to the November 21st Planning Commission meeting to allow the applicant to bring back elevations showing the revisions to improve the residential character of the structure for review by the Planning Commission?
I would make a substitute motion to do that, and I would say that I think we need both stone features, and I would still contend that I think a horizontal lap siding would work, and I get the connection between the roof and the vertical siding from a metal building standpoint. There's trim pieces that work. You may have to extend the roof to have a soffit on that end so you can butt up to the bottom of the soffit. I don't know what that needs to look like. I'm not going to say what it needs to look like, but it can happen. It's just, it's not a pre-engineered building that comes with the pre-engineered trim. So I would make a substitute motion to delay this for a couple weeks to have the applicant present us with something that we feel like meets the intent of the aesthetics of the building.
Is there a second for that motion, the substitute motion? Galen seconded that motion. All right, Karen, you're up.
Thank you. I agree with the motion. I think that it is our duty is to make sure that this goes forward, and I think the gentleman should have the ability to put up a garage, but it should be something that will fit into the neighborhood. And I know that there is some space, and again, go back to the idea of maybe even adding some trees, because the other things are hidden, the other garages in the neighborhood are hidden farther back, and they don't, you don't see that structures from the street as much. And I think having trees or whatever you can do to soften that and make it appear that it's hiding back there a little bit, that would help also. So consider that when you're looking at going forward with this. So I agree with the motion to continue.
And just to clarify, that date is November 21st, right? It's the Wednesday meeting before Thanksgiving? Okay. Any further discussion? I hesitate to ask.
Chairman, I'd
Yes,
just like to
Bob.
clarify, we are only asking for two exceptions, the size of the garage and the 50 feet of paved surface off of J.W. Gould Road. Those are the only two exceptions we are asking for.
I just read an arbitrary number, so thanks for clarifying.
Down to a vote then. All those in favor of continuing this item to November 21st to allow the applicant to provide some better design, so to speak, on showing us what the garage will look like, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 9.
Thank you. Item number 9 is a major amendment to a conditional use permit to allow electronic reader board sign in association with an existing church at 402 Kansas City Street. The subject property is zoned Central Business District, and this is the property for the church. The lot directly to the west is a parking lot for the church, which is also owned by the church, and it's tied together with a developmental lot agreement. This is an aerial view of the church, and again noting the parking lot here. The church is located at the corner of Kansas City Street and 5th Street. Future land use for the property shows it as downtown. And then on the city's major street plan, 5th Street is identified as a principal arterial street, and Kansas City Street is a middle street. The site plan for the church shows for the parking lot and the parking area, shows the church on the east side, and the proposed sign, will be located here. It is approximately 18 feet high with 10 feet of clearance, so it'll be located along 5th Street. There is an existing monument sign located here on the southeast side of the property for the church. And this is a dimension drawing of what the proposed sign will look like. It'll have 36.5 feet of screen area. It will be two-sided. The total area of the monument, or excuse me, of the sign itself will be 70 square feet on each side, but the screen will only be 36.5 square feet. And I was able to take some site photos. This is looking directly east across the church parking lot. About where the conditional use permit request sign is located is approximately where the pole sign will also be located for the electronic reader board. And this is looking back to the northwest, again noting that this island, this landscape island, will be the approximate location for the electronic reader board sign. This is looking back directly to the west. The adjacent property is a parking lot and then a tire shop behind that. Across Kansas City Street to the south is the Boys and Girls Club and also a tailoring retail center. And looking to the north is the Hardee's restaurant, and again noting that that pole sign will be located at this end of that landscape island. And looking back to the south, and this is looking across the street back to the east from that parking lot and that tire center, back to the west. And staff would recommend that if the Planning Commission deems the location appropriate for an electronic reader board sign, that it be approved with stipulations.
Thank you. Any questions for staff on this one? Karen is recusing herself from this item. Galen made the motion to approve item 9 per staff recommendations. There's a second. Oh, Justin seconded the motion. Any discussion on it? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The motion carries with Rachel voting no and Karen abstaining. I think we're down to staff items. Patsy, is that you?
So, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
as some of you may be wanting to leave, I just wanted to comment that, as mentioned earlier, our next Planning Commission meeting is on a Wednesday right before Thanksgiving. And so when Andrea sends out that quorum request, it is imperative that you respond. Call us, email us, we don't care. We just need to make sure that we have quorum. And thank you in advance for attending the next meeting.
Good morning. We just want to go over some proposed changes to our existing tax increment financing policy. Recently, we visited with Sioux Falls. Ken and I took a trip over to the east side of the state, visited with Sioux Falls and then Aberdeen so that we could get an understanding of how they worked with their tax increment districts. Sioux Falls then came to town for an open house that we had with a joint session of the Planning Commission and the Council. They currently have 21 tax increment districts. 18 of those districts are within their core area, and they have 12 active districts. Most of their districts focus on the downtown and core neighborhoods. They try to encourage redevelopment of blight, deteriorated areas. They try to stimulate their economic development. They want to stimulate private investment, and they only offset extraordinary development costs. And they are dedicated to reimbursements of only those costs that are absolutely necessary to make the project viable. They also require lots of different things. They are very adamant about looking for that but-for test. They always have a third-party review of their project costs. The agreements generally focus on what the financial gap is, listing and capping amounts of eligible expenses. So they might have lots of different eligible expenses, but they don't always reimburse all of those potential eligible costs as part of the project. And then they also do their certification based on actual costs expended as listed in their agreements. So a couple questions, why are we looking at policy revisions? We want to make sure that our districts focus on infill development. We use our existing infrastructure more efficiently in our core area. We are trying to simplify and improve the certification process as well as the staff review when an application comes in. And we want to make sure that our TIF districts are only for we use them responsibly and that only when they're determined absolutely necessary. So here's a map that we have of our existing and dissolved TIF boundaries. We're going to talk about those circled areas in the next slide, but I want you to look at where we actually have our districts. And you can see generally this follows the outskirts of our existing city limits boundary. I apologize that you cannot see the existing city limits boundary, but generally everywhere there is a district on the outside of the map, that's where the outer limits of our existing district or existing city limits are. We have currently 80 tax increment districts. 24 of those are active districts, and as you can see as a comparison with Sioux Falls, they have a total of 21 districts versus our 80, and they have 12 active and we have 24 active. And so I'm sure all of you know how a tax increment district works. When we establish a district, the base value is always, and the taxes collected on the property taxes collected on the base value is always allocated to the taxing districts, or the taxing agency, excuse me. And then anytime there's construction or improved, increased valuation on the property, those are the tax dollars, the property tax dollars that are sent toward the payment of the project plan costs. And so the lines that I've referenced earlier, we are trying to focus the districts now on our core community. This is our original town. We have a mile boundary around that for our primary core, and then we also have within that primary core our revitalization nodes based on our comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2014. We have some revitalization corridors. This is West Chicago, here's Campbell, St. Pat Street, and then we also have nodes that need revitalized. You've seen some of those nodes around. St. Pat is a good one along Elm, and then out by 44, and then of course La Crosse Street at Omaha, North Street, and then closer looks like Anamosa. I'm guessing right here is Anamosa. And then our secondary core is in the blue area. So, we've also come up with a new evaluation chart to help evaluate, whether a TIF is feasible or not. And so we'll talk about that, but we do try to focus our new TIFs, or we will focus our new TIFs potentially in the core area, and then the secondary, which is in the blue boundary. And the other thing that we're going to try to do is focus more on affordable housing. Recently, state law came up with a new classification, which is affordable housing classification. And what that does is based on South Dakota Housing Association or Development Authority's maximum first-time home buyers cost, it can qualify for an affordable housing district, and that's important because instead of having the local school district property owners pay that portion of the school district's tax increment, the entire state pays for it, similar to an economic development TIF. So it's really critical, if we do look at affordable housing and we want that classification based on the Department of Revenue's new language, we can do that, but we're going to have some way to ensure that our developers are following those guidelines. But anyway, the other one that we looked at is affordable. And now our policy, a lot of times we have developers come forward that they're providing affordable workforce housing. Well, really, what is that? So we broke it down. Affordable housing now is going to be anything that is 80% or lower of our average median income. For 2018, that average median income is $70,100 per year for a 4-person family. So 80% of that is in here. Here's 80. Then we have a 50% category, and our extremely low is a 30%. Our existing policy already has these numbers in it, but we very seldom see any applications that meet those requirements. So we're also recommending some different language in our agreements that come forward with a TIF to address those numbers as well. And so then we look at our second definition of housing references, and that's the workforce housing. And these are the numbers that are specifically associated in the new state law so that we can get a housing classification in our TIFs. The maximum first-time home buyer purchase price is $250,000, and their income can be no more than $71,000 for a 2-person or $81,000 for a 3-person income. Excuse me. And so then we've also refined our blight criteria and what that definition is. So if you're looking at a residential district, you have to have at least 20% of the area within the district that property has a 20% decrease in valuation. For non-residential, it's 30%. And you might say, well, we've had, at one of our open houses, we've had developers indicate that we don't have any property in town that meets any of that criteria. So we made it, we analyzed that. And so you can see all of the dark red areas, that is at least a 30% decrease. The mauve sort of color is 20 to 30%, and then the lighter colors are 10 to 20%. So we do have property within our priority area that needs to be redeveloped or that can be used as part of that blight requirement. And so what we are also focusing on, we've got not only a priority area, but we've got priority uses. We are targeting both blight and economic development, and we've enhanced the economic development definition to be consistent with that the Economic Foundation used in their information, so that we are consistent. And you know, we have included some flexibility in this proposal, but you know, we want to make sure that we're still targeting, you know, some of the best benefit that we can get for the community. We've also identified that we want to target those implementation tasks within our existing master plans, including our comprehensive plan, our downtown master plan, our new utility system master plan, and then our block grant. We've also made just a couple changes to our project management. We're going back to the finance department, our community development department, Public Works, and then a representative from economic development to actually work with the applicant to refine their application so that it's consistent with our new goals. Then once that application's put together, we'll share that information with the school district and the county. And then, you know, we work again with the applicant to get their project refined. We put together the project plan and all the associated agreements. And then the new piece is that the city's going to manage the public improvement projects within those TIF districts. And what that will do is, in the end, when the certification comes in, there'll be a lot less issue with finding invoices or finding, you know, any kind of information that might be lacking. So with that, we've also gotten assurance from our Public Works Department that that will just be another project in their existing workload. There will be no new staff members. So some guiding principles. We want to make sure that that the applicant understands there's no guarantee for a TIF. There never has been, but you know, sometimes we get the impression from others that, you know, all you have to do is apply and you get a TIF. we want to make sure that's not the case. That there is, the next principle is that they have to show a necessity for their TIF. As an incentive, we're going to encourage a 10-year payoff. We want to make sure that they use the affordable housing tool if that's what their proposal is. We want to make sure that economic development is a large part. We want to look again at the blight, make sure that it's only excessive costs that the TIF is paying for. Everything is privately funded. The financing costs are based on the increased value, of course. Everything is in compliance with our existing state regulations. There are no tax waivers. What I mean by that is generally with an apartment building, you can get a waiver from the assessor's office for a 5-year tax abatement. In a TIF, it's critical that the property taxes are going into the TIF fund. Otherwise, there's some potential for it not to be paid off. So we want to make sure that they also sign a waiver that they're not going to request any kind of abatement at all for any property within the district. And then we're also including in our agreements some performance measures and clawbacks to make sure that they stay on target with their proposed construction timeline. We do still include the economic development grants when necessary, and then that we have adjusted some of the TIF project costs as well. And so now we go to our eligible project costs. All of the costs are tied specifically to public improvement needs. There's still an administrative fee of $20,000 or 0.5% of the total TIF costs, whichever is greater. And that really has to do with the amount of time staff spends on reviewing and creating the plans and then the certification. And as necessary, city staff and will work with the developer to refine those costs. There's a restriction on only 2 overlapping TIF districts. You can get an exception, but as state law identifies, you can't have an identical TIF boundary for any proposed TIF. And there's a maximum 3-year timeline for the city to accept the public improvements. And currently, state law identifies that you have to expend your costs within a project plan within 5 years. We've kind of gotten to the point now where as long as it's under construction for that public improvement within that 5-year timeline, that's still okay. We are reining that in so that the city actually has to accept those public improvements within 3 years so that we can get all of the costs lined out with that 5 years, and the developer then can be eligible for all potential costs instead of some that are outside that boundary. So then, of course, we go to our evaluation criteria. Of course, we've got base requirements. We have to determine the need, make sure that it's financially feasible. We look at the cost projections. They have to provide a market analysis and then a legal review that everything is in compliance as proposed based on state law and our policy. And so then we've gone through also a new criteria evaluation. We've got points for the location, and you can get more than 1 point or 2 points within some of these features. And I'm not going to read them all to you, but it's critical that we've looked really hard at trying to make sure that we're fair when we evaluate these proposals. And now we have at least some guideline on, kind of how to get there. Here's one that I want to show. We talked about the affordable housing, which is the 80% of area median income. You can actually receive 6 points within this one criteria based on, what you're proposing. And we're also targeting the participation rate because we see developers, or in some of the applications, there's been very little participation rate, we've gotten the impression that most all of the costs can be covered, and there's very little developer costs associated. So we're trying to adjust that, get the developer to have to commit more of their funds to getting a TIF. And then the other thing is you have to have a minimum of 10 points. With all of these different 18 pieces, you have to have a minimum of 10 points before you can even, we'll even take the application forward. So, you know, it's fairly easy depending on what you're proposing or what the developers are proposing to get those 10 points. We've gone through several applications, and there were only a couple on the outlying areas that did not meet that minimum 10-point number. Then we've got some specific information on how a TIF is certified and the process for that. That's really for the developer's benefit. And then I came up with a couple different examples. Now there are, you know, some holes in this number, and it's not really an actual pro forma because it's just based on a one-year timeline, you know, generally. And most of the time with a lot of these costs, there's depreciation that extends more than 1 year, but, you know, it's just really kind of a general number. So here we've got the original application proposal, and you can see that based on these costs, they're going to lose almost 200%. And the participation rate, you know, from the developer is really zero. Well, with a TIF, you know, one of the things that staff requested is some connectivity in the sidewalk. So really, this $107,000, $100,000 item really wouldn't be required unless there was a TIF. So then we recalculated, excluding those developer costs, and then, you know, their loss is about 175%. So then we go with the proposal for a TIF. Now here they're making about 15% based on the TIF paying for the landscaping, for the off-site sidewalk, for a street section that has to be relocated, some drainage improvements, and then some grading improvements. And with that, they make, again, about 15%. So as staff looked at it, it appeared that there is some regional drainage in about, you know, 35% of the cost here is regional drainage. So we identified the 65% that really the developer should pay because, you know, we're trying to get only public improvements, and regional drainage is really a public improvement, not a private improvement. So then it does decrease that cost by, or their profit, to about 3.6%. So, you know, these are just some ways that we can look at, you know, how to work with the developer to get really a refined cost and what they can and would not make it as part of it. But, you know, even with this particular proposal, we're still at just over half of their participation rate. So we're trying to get that a little closer so that, you know, we get a fairer deal for the rest of the taxpayers. But with that, that's really a quick overview of kind of what we're proposing to date. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
Thanks, Patsy.
Let me just add, and again, I apologize, I'm not doing too well with my voice today, but I think the key points here are that we're trying to put a new focus on the use of TIF, that we're focusing on economic development, we're focusing on affordable housing, and we're trying to focus on a priority area that we're going to take care of our core community better than what we have. So I think it's looking at responsible use of TIF and looking at the examples of other cities, especially Sioux Falls. This is exactly what they're doing, and it's why they're successful with their program and they have fewer TIFs than we do. I think that plays a key component there. So.
Thanks, Ken. I do have a few questions up. Kurt?
Yeah, you know, looking at the past where we've done TIFs, you know, you had that map, Patsy, that shows where all our TIF districts are. And, you know, in the past, it's obvious that we've worked on expanding the city boundaries and doing all these TIFs way outside the, you know, the outline. And, you know, the fault in that is that it extends the city's infrastructure way out there that might not necessarily pay it back, because all it's paying for that infrastructure and the maintenance of it through the years is these outlying areas, and it just doesn't pencil out. So the city has an extra, you know, in one example, maybe a mile of water line that they have to maintain to get to that TIF district. So I like this concept where we're bringing it more into the core of the city, and you know, it's going to not only help public works, but it's going to help, you know, just develop our downtown and our core area and get rid of some of these real blighted areas that maybe should be more focused on. So I like what you're doing. I like that we're limiting the amount of, you know, profit, you know, that's being generated to somebody else through public funding of these projects. So I'm in favor of what you're doing, and I think this is great. Thank you.
Rachel?
You know, just like Kurt, I think this is fantastic. You know, it's frustrating to me, you know, serving on the TIF review committee, when I see developers come in and they ask for tips for, you know, affordable housing that maybe isn't even affordable. And, you know, you look at that little triangle and you think, well, that's money the city wasn't getting anyway. But then you think, well, there are a ton of houses that are going in this area. They're increasing the demand for services without increasing the, you know, the means to pay for those services. And so this is so essential. I have a couple of sort of, I mean, I wouldn't call them nitpicky, because I don't think they're nitpicky, but they're kind of like little detailed questions that have more to do with the draft policy than the presentation. There was one, and this is all referencing the draft policy. So I have page 7, 4D. It says that, and I don't have the whole draft policy in front of me, so I'm just kind of doing this from memory. I think it was talking about affordable housing had to be in a transit service line. And so I was wondering if it had to be directly, it might be hard to answer this question without it sitting in front of you, but I was curious if it, you know, affordable housing had to be like directly on a transit service line, and if you're referencing like a bus line, if that's what that's talking about.
Sort of. You know, when you look at transit-oriented development, that affordable housing has to be within about a half a mile, because that is considered walkable. So that's really the intent of, you know, that language, is to make sure that, you know, it's a walkable, affordable housing project. Because, you know, if you create an affordable housing project, you know, on the outskirts of town where there is no transit, that really increases their transportation costs, which really lowers the ability of them to actually afford that home on the outskirts. So we're trying to focus it in on where we have existing lines.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's great. I think that was kind of my question, is was it directly on, and it's half a mile away from that. And I think Rapid City Collective Impact has done, you know, great work in this sense of mapping, you know, where people actually have access to transportation, and, you know, how do you get your food if you can't get to your food, and things like that. And then another question was about the TIF review team. So I'm guessing that the TIF review committee is disappearing, which makes sense. I mean, a lot of people don't even show up. I was wondering if any of the evaluation meetings or anything like that are open hearings?
No. State law actually only requires the Planning Commission and council to have a public hearing. Okay. And so then, you know, we've restricted it to, you know, staff so that we can work more closely with the applicant to refine those applications instead of trying to do that in an open forum.
Okay. So, but these are still going to come before a planning commission or city council. So there still will be open hearings in the process.
Correct.
Okay, fantastic. And then last question is about the no tax abatement, which makes total sense to me. But when you have a developer who's kind of developing the grading and things like that, and then they pass it off to a different owner who, you know, builds an apartment building, so both that developer and the new owner, that property cannot have any more tax abatement on it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And to ensure that that is followed through, we'll work on not only language in the existing or in the developer's agreement, but also restrictive covenants if necessary, so that we can ensure that affordability remains throughout the life of the district.
Okay. Thank you for answering my questions. Again, I think this is fantastic. I think it's really good work.
Vince?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you so much for putting this out there. Where were you 20 years ago? This is desperately needed, and I'm glad you've taken the time to do this and lay it out the way you have and bring in the Sioux Falls examples. In particular, one of the things, I love what Kurt and Rachel had to say because it's exactly right. And we're on target with this, from what I can see, in total agreement with you. Well, I'm in total agreement with you. And one of the things that impresses me the most is the fact that you're addressing affordable housing. I felt that I've been up here and I've had to address affordable housing because I've asked petitioners, how do they determine that? Because they're calling it affordable housing, workforce housing. But when I said low-income housing, they take offense, saying, no, I never said it was low-income housing. Well, now we have some definitions. I like that. And that puts less of the burden on me and more of the burden on the petitioner so that they can come forward and have all their research done properly. Great plan. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Karen?
Thank you. First, I want to say I really like the idea that the staff is going to meet with the developer because there's so many things that can enhance the TIF district or keep us from voting on something that really shouldn't have been in there in the first place. And it's hard for elected officials or us up here to go through every little detail. And there's a lot of things that staff can work with that developer to make sure that it's fine-tuned to the right thing that comes forward to us. So I really appreciate that part. I have two quick questions. One is on the mortgage rates. Does that include the taxes that have to go through? I mean, a lot of times mortgages include taxes. Is that included in that?
Correct. And when we reference affordable housing, the maximum mortgage or rent includes 15% for utilities as well, and that number can't exceed 30%. So your mortgage would include your principal and your interest and your property taxes, all three of those, plus 15% of the utilities. That is the 30% max on your income.
Okay, thanks. And the other final question is, when is this going to be presented so that the developers see what's out there before it comes to us for a vote?
We put this particular policy out online
A few months ago.
I think sometime early this summer. The current version has been out there since the middle of October. We would probably anticipate sometime after the first of the year before we take it through so that, we skip the holiday season.
Okay, so are you going to have another meeting for developers or not?
I would anticipate that.
Okay, because I'm sure that they'll
Exactly.
have their 2 cents. Okay, thank you.
Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm fairly new to this, so I'm still getting my head wrapped around TIFs and TIF districts, so kind of bear with me. So I like the fact that it's like a defined time period, like 10 years for payback. During that time, the taxes, excuse me, stay stable. Is that correct? Property taxes stay stable for that time period, but in terms of increased services like for fire, police, schools, infrastructure, that all has to be paid for. Those increases every year have to be paid for someplace. So that basically puts increased burden on the taxpayer during that payback time period. Is that correct?
Well, we have visited with our fire chief and police chief in the past about how much it really costs for not only TIFs but also for annexations, and the response has always been it's a minimal cost. However, we know that there is a cost associated with providing services outside, the area where they have to extend services. But, we really don't quite have a number on that yet. But Generally, the way it works, you know, the base valuation goes to the taxing agencies as it is when the district is created. You know, we're only capturing the valuation on new structures. So, you know, we're trying to minimize, you know, what happens with those dollars. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So there's no way of knowing how much money over that 10-year time period is going to be at risk to pay for additional services for each and every year of increase. Is that correct?
Well, I believe those departments always kind of plan on, you know, future extensions of their services. And they include that generally, I'm guessing, with their proposal every budget cycle. You know, so until we get to that point where, you know, they need more staffing, you know, their answer has always been, you know, it's very minimal. So.
I don't have any other lights up. I do appreciate the presentation, though. I've got a few sort of wording questions, comments. Would I or any of the other commissioners that have the same thing be able to email you?
Absolutely.
Things like that?
Absolutely.
Great. Anything else for us today? Oh, Kurt.
Can we get that clock changed to the right time?
Sure.
We were like a half hour into the meeting, and I look up there and I go, it's already 9:30?
Just felt that way.
Early.
I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Rachel made the motion. Karen seconded the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.